Hello and welcome back to the Anglia Plane Modeller YouTube channel. This time we're going to be building the Arma Hobby 1/48 scale Hawker Hurricane Mk.IIc. This was my first attempt at building a 1/48 scale kit. Previously I've just built 1/72 scale and I thought I'd go for a Hurricane as I'd never built one before, and this kit had some fantastic reviews. So first impressions of the kit are really good. Nice box art, the instructions are really clear, full colour. And then I also added some 3D printed parts as well. So I went for some exhaust stacks and cannons from Edward, some control surfaces and landing flaps, some Quinta 3D decals for the seat belts and internal cockpit, and then a brilliant one-man army masking set for the little stencils, which I've never used before, and they were absolutely brilliant. So let's get to it. So as with most builds, I start with the clear parts. So once I've prepped the kit with a wash, I'll take off the clear parts carefully, sand them back, and then dip them in this gauzy glass coat agent just to protect them a little bit from when I'm gluing them and to give them a bit of a shine as well. So you just have to dip it in and then leave it to dry on a bit of toilet roll to absorb. And then I had a look at the 3D printed parts. So previously I've only used PE parts for the landing flaps, which are really fiddly, lots of glue required, but these ones are obviously moulded as one piece, and they're really good. So it also, I just wanted the landing flaps, but it also comes with some ailerons and the tail section there, so you can have them at whatever kind of angles you want. I just thought it'd add some nice detail to this kit, as it's a bit bigger than what I usually build. So first thing you do is you have to cut out some of the sections of the existing kit. So some of the flaps here, or the ailerons here, so I just mask them up first to help if I slip at all, to stop any scratches going on the actual kit. And the detail on this is so good that I don't want to mess anything up. So I masked it off and then used a combination of my sharp hobby knife with a new blade and then the little razor saw, which I kind of just used with my hand rather than on a pen or anything, just a bit, so I've got a bit more control. So give it a good sand, and then you're ready just to line them up and test fit everything. So this here, I'm just lining it up so I can put the little kind of hooks in, but I won't attach these until a bit later. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have used this part of the 3D kit. It didn't really add a whole lot. I mean, I can have them at different angles, but they were a bit warped, and I only kind of read afterwards that you can straighten them out by dipping them in some hot water and then straighten them and then put them in cold water. But I ended up trying to just, as I was sort of bending and flexing them, I actually broke one, which was a bit annoying. But anyway, once I've prepped it all, you can attach it to the kit, and just to make sure it all looks good. And then I've gone over with some primer, and then the insides of these, the internal parts, from reference photos and from what I've read, were aluminium or silver metal aluminium colour. They may have been painted. So I thought I'd do that first once they're on, like so, just to see that everything's alright, they fit well, any gaps will show up really easily on there. So, but overall I was really happy with those. So then on to the main build. Started off in this kit, you start with the wheel well. The kit is really good, the fit is excellent, all the instructions are very clear, and everything has like a little location tab or something to show where things go, and it's very clear. It was a real pleasure actually to put it together. There's no kind of guesswork, which coming from my previous build, which was a short run kit, was a nightmare, but this one was excellent. So again, I pretty much use Tamiya extra thin for everything. I like when it dries, even if you do go a bit heavy with it, when it dries it kind of evaporates nicely, and then the primer will just cover it all up if there's any shiny bits. But yeah, it's gone together so well so far. So just carrying on with the wheel well assembly. The front wall is finished, and then you just attach the back wall using plenty of extra thin to get in the gaps and make sure it's all bonded securely. Normally the bits where you clip them off the sprue, you can see a couple of little sections there. I would clean them up a little bit more, but these internal ones, I know that they're going to be, that's where they are attached to the different bits of the wing, so you can't see them anyway. So I just sand them down so they're smooth and they don't get in the way of anything, so it's a nice kind of flat surface to attach. And then, as you can see here, it has glue anyway, and then the little kind of floor panel I'm about to attach, this bit here, that covers it all up anyway. But obviously any external bits where you snip it off the sprue, I take a bit more care in making sure it's all nice and smooth. So this bit is pretty much it for the wheel well, and that will go on the underside, which then kind of forms part of the floor as well for the cockpit. And then once the well is complete, you can then attach some of these little hoses and pipes. I think this one needs to be bronze colour when it comes to painting. And then when that's all done, you then attach that to the lower wing section, and then after this you then start building up the floor of the cockpit around it. So onto the seat. So the seat and the cockpit is usually one of my favourite parts of the build. Normally can't get loads of detail in on a 1/72 scale kit, but this one, as it's a bit bigger, you can add a little bit more detail into it. So you have to obviously cut the little parts off the sprues, and then each side panel or side bit of the seat you have to attach separately. I'd say one of the only flaws with this kit is some of the mould lines where the parts are attached to the sprue. The kind of where the plastic goes in and where you snip it off, it kind of overlaps a little bit. So sometimes you're not quite sure where the part ends and the sprue ends and the part begins. And there was a couple of little bits here where I've snipped thinking it was pretty close, so I don't have to clean it up so much, but I've actually snipped a tiny bit of the part off, which then makes it a little bit more tricky to attach parts together. But that's the only downside, I would say. But other than that, it's really good. And then we can set that aside for a second while we start to build up the floor. So I've attached the two upper and lower parts of the wings together, because obviously the wheel well is underneath this bit, and then you start off with the framework and then the floor panel where the kind of footrests go. And then I've done that, and then the next bit is to start creating the different elements of the cockpit. So you've got the kind of control arm in the middle with the little kind of gear and chain that goes around the back. And then top section. And then this is where we start to use the Quinta 3D decals on here. You do get some really nice decals in the box, and I've seen lots of people when they've attached them and put matte coats and everything, they look really good. But I just like the 3D versions, and they're already pre-painted as well, so it helps with the fiddly work. So I use some clear CA glue, I think it's the VMS glue, just a few dabs of that just to help secure it in place. You don't get too many shots at this if you're using the glue, so you kind of got to make sure it's lined up nicely and then attached like this. So this set includes quite a bit of interior detail with these 3D decals. So as well as the instrument panel, you then got some of the control levers and dials and stuff on the frame. So I've already pre-painted the frame in the matte sort of aluminium colour, and then sometimes it's a good idea to give it a clear coat and make sure it's nice and smooth, but because you're using CA glue on this and there's no kind of carrier film, it doesn't really matter in my opinion. So there's quite a few small fiddly ones to put on as well, and once they're on and dry, we can then start to build up the cockpit a bit more with the side tube framework going on each side there. And again, as with everything in this kit, everything has a proper tab or hole that everything fits into nicely. Some of them this is probably the trickiest part. Make sure that everything is kind of upright and in place, and you do have to do it in a certain order because kind of bits of framework fit over other bits, so just make sure you follow the instructions on this one. So I've gone ahead and finished with the framework on either side, and then I've attached the seat to the armour plating at the back, put the Quinta seat belts on, and then assembled it all in place. So once I'm going to leave that to dry, make sure everything's set, because there is a lot of parts there that need to kind of stay in position. And while it's drying, I'm going to crack on with the propeller. So the propeller is quite straightforward to go together. It's really nice how it's built up though. So there's obviously the 3-blade prop on this Hurricane, and then the little centre hub. And once that's set, I've primed it all in white primer, so Mr. Surfacer 1500 in white, because I'm then doing these yellow tips first, and I think the yellow, which is from MRP, I struggle with spraying yellow to be honest and building up the coats, but it goes on much better on a white surface rather than black. I think you can use like pink and stuff, but white's handy just because you can use it as a white colour for other stuff as well. So once I've sprayed the white on the tips on both sides, I can then let that dry, and then I mask those over. And the Tamiya tape, it's quite transparent, so you can kind of make sure they're even on all 3 blades there. So just using my tweezers to make sure they're all masked off nicely. And then I can come in with some flat black. Sometimes I use rubber black, sometimes I use grey black or black grey, just so it's not a boring black. But this one I've just gone for a flat black because I am going to do some weathering to this prop, which I haven't done on previous builds, but it's nice to have a smooth black starting point for this one. And then once I've done the black, I then move on to the nose cone. This one I'm building has got a sky blue nose cone, and I've used the sky, I've changed the colour slightly, just by making it slightly more grey, because it is a bit different to the underside colour, which is also sky. But that and the band around the fuselage, I've matched those two together. So a good couple of coats of the sky, and while that's drying, I can then mask up the bottom of the blades to do the hub, which is metal. So once they're all masked up, I use the real thin ones because they go around the curves a lot easier. And then once I've got the line, then I can mask up the blades a little bit more. But the needle I use is a 0.3, I think it is, on this Mobius airbrush. And you don't really get much overspray if you just make sure the pressure is set quite low. I normally spray at kind of 12-ish. So if you come in quite close and don't pull back on the trigger too hard, you don't get too much overspray. So I've just got a little bit of masking tape on there to paint the metal part of the hub on the prop. When I was looking into painting the prop and the correct colours and stuff and the weathering, I got a bit of stick for it because I put a video up on Facebook, and a few warriors were on there and said, oh, well, they were just wood, there was no chipping or no scratches or anything, which after having done some research, I know that this particular propeller and hub and nose and everything, it was a metal hub with like compressed resin wood blades, but then they had like a metal edging to it, which did show through with scratches and not necessarily chips, but just you could see it. And so I found some photos of worn out blades, and then I based the weathering on that. So I was really happy with the end result, but some people said, it wasn't too much, but it was my first attempt at it, and I was really happy. So, but before I started the weathering, I obviously put the nose cone over the top, and then give it all a clear coat to make sure your nice paint work is all sealed in, ready for a little bit of weathering. So once the clear coat had dried, I then came in with some Tamiya panel line in black, just to highlight some of these details here, and then the usual process of kind of buffing it off with a cotton bud afterwards. And then after that, I moved on to creating some scratch and kind of like chipping effect, but not chipping, with some AK True Metal wax, which I thinned down a little bit with some odourless thinner. I know a lot of people use like chipping fluid or masking fluid, that sort of thing, to create some chips, but this is the first time I'm having a go at this, and I wanted to go for something that you could quite easily get rid of if it didn't work, or if you went a bit too strong with it. So I just used a little sponge, so thinned down the metal wax stuff, and then used a sponge just to dab on in kind of a random motion. But I was really happy with how it came out, actually. So I'll use that again in the future, I think. And then once that had been done, I went over it with a matte coat, and then I came in with some ammo oil brusher oils, just to highlight again that middle bit there, which from the photos used to get a little bit grubby with dirt and oil and things like that. But overall, I was really happy with how that came out. And then after finishing up with the oils there, I just blended it all together with a light brush, just so it's not quite so bold. And then once I finished up with that, I then went over it with a slightly bigger brush. That's just the kind of technique I think that works quite well for me, like so. So once the prop was finished, I could carry on with the main assembly. So the two halves of the fuselage are put together, and I've spent a bit of time cleaning up the seam, and then that just clips on, goes over the cockpit assembly and then clips into place into the wings. Really nice fit there. Pretty much I don't think I needed to tidy that up at all. And then a couple of the other assembly parts underneath, so kind of the radiator, grille, and then the tail piece at the back. All just kind of slots in, and then a bit of extra thin to glue it all in. And then the tail sections, I don't think I used the 3D parts on the tail section in the end, because the kit ones were really good and I wasn't planning on changing the angle around too much. But there's the tail piece that goes on. So now the fun bit begins with I've masked off the cannons, which I already painted in like a gunmetal, and then you saw that we painted the landing flaps, the internal bit. So I've masked all them off, and then some of the clear parts as well have all been masked. You get a masking set with this kit actually, so I've used that on here. And then I'm coming in with some Mr. Surfacer Black 1500 and just a few light coats. So I go on probably 1:3 ratio, I'd say. So 1 part Mr. Surfacer and then 3 parts thinner, the leveling thinner, and then just go over all of it pretty lightly to see if I've got any seam lines or ghost seam lines or anything that needs tidying up. And you can see so much detail on this kit. It's really cool. So it's got some raised rivets, some recessed rivets, some of the fasteners are really nice as well. And then so you can see there that after going over with one coat of the primer, I wasn't happy with the seam line at the top there. So I've come in with some CA glue and then sanded that down, and then had to rescribe some of the panel lines in and then gone over it again. So now I'm happy with the priming. I'm then going in with some pre-shading, and this is flat white, thinned quite a way down actually, just so it's easier to come through the airbrush. I struggle with white as well, with the kind of paint flicking and stuff. And I'm just trying to bring out all of the little individual panels and in between the rivet lines, so I can kind of highlight them without too much weathering on the other side. So just take my time and make sure that I'm covering every little detail there. It's quite therapeutic once you get into a rhythm like this, and you just and it's spraying really nicely. Then I like this bit. It's cool. With pre-shading, sometimes I go in with some different colours as well. On this one, the underside is going to be sky, the RAF kind of sky blue colour, which is this. And sometimes I think other colours kind of come through a little bit too strong, because I like the worn, weathered effect, and I don't like building up the colour too thickly. So a lot of the pre-shading does show through quite a bit, and in the previous builds I wasn't 100% happy when I used some different colours with a lighter one. With a darker shade I think it's different, and same with like the camo, I think that can look really good with different shades. But so again, my technique for this is, once the pre-shading's done, is to do a very similar technique, and rather than paint big sections all at once, I go in kind of filling in the little squares each time. And you can see there that I've actually already painted. I paint the roundels and the markings on this one, so there's no decals at all. And I used to paint the roundels and markings on after I've done the main colour, but I found that sometimes, firstly, you have to get it right. Otherwise, if you get any kind of bleed that comes through from the mask, then it's difficult to fix when it's like you have to try and get a perfect circle again. Whereas in this case, if this roundel, for example, isn't exactly perfect, or you've had a little bit of bleed that comes through underneath the mask, then it doesn't matter, because the mask is a circle, and then the kind of the top colour is going to sort that out anyway. So I've done that first. And also, it's got the same amount of paint on. There's no extra layers, so there's no kind of lip that you get if you spray on roundels or lettering afterwards. So I'm just continuing with going through section by section, making sure that they're all covered with the sky, but not too thick. And then once everything has got a good coat on it, a good kind of thin coat, then I can blend it all in with a thinner version, but I can then do like an overall spray just to blend it all in. But doing this technique and just taking your time means that you can really be happy with the effect that you create. So underside is done, so I'm now flipping over to the top, and I've done a separate video on spraying roundels and things, but it's just showing you that how I do it. So I've gone on with the white first, and then usually start from the inside out. So this is me just doing the marking yellow. I use MRP paints, just you don't need to mix them or anything, they're already pre-thinned and they just spray really nicely. So for small individual work like this, when you're not using much paint at all, I find it's just simpler if you can just take a little bit out of a bottle and just crack on with it, rather than have to thin it down, mix it up and everything. And plus the colours are then all completely uniform then. So roundels on the fuselage has got the yellow bands, whereas the ones on the wings haven't, they're just blue and red. So once I've done that, I can then come in with the first camo colour. I'm going to freehand most of this. So that's the dark earth, RAF dark earth, which is from Mr. Colour. And again, I'm going over it quite thin and then doing multiple layers to build it up. So some parts will look a little bit more worn than others, which I quite like. And I'm trying to do it, again, filling in the little squares so that we can keep the panel lines and rivet lines. But I'm just basing it off the instruction books that shows you the colour schemes, and I'm just kind of doing it by eye in this case. Again, I know that one technique is just to spray the whole thing in the dark earth first, then mask it off and then come in with the green, or the other way around. But again, I want to make sure that the paint layers are all uniform. There's not one, like the green in that case would have kind of 2 or 3 layers, whereas the dark earth would have 1 or 2 layers. So there might be a little lip. Might be. Sometimes there's not, depends how thin you paint them on. But I like this technique. They don't have to be perfect lines or anything, but because I am going to use some of this AK camo masking putty anyway. So, and because I use quite thick kind of blobs of it, or sausages, it creates like a nice smooth line when you're spraying the green in. So I've done the first end of that wing there, and then taking it off just to check what the effect is. So it's not like a solid line between the green and the brown, but there is quite a clear separation line there. So I'm just taking my time with it. Again, same technique, trying to fill in the little blocks, little squares, to make sure it's all coming out nicely. And then I thought I'd just unmask this bit just to see how it's all going, because you don't want to do the entire plane and think, oh, that shades off, or the separation lines are terrible. So I just thought I'd have a little look at it. And then I also was a bit impatient, and I wanted to see if the roundel would come out okay as well. And again, same as the side ones and the yellow, I've used the MRP paints for the blue and the red. Not the smoothest unmasking, but there you go. So that's one wing pretty much done with roundel, and then the dark earth and dark green camo, and then the cannon as well, just to show what that looks like. Okay, so then I started doing the other side. I've done a little bit of the dark earth on the fuselage section, and now I'm just doing the other wing. The dark earth's already done, and then going in with the dark green with exactly the same technique. Obviously, the AK putty, the camo putty, is really good because you can manipulate into obviously whatever shape you want. But it does, when it warms up a bit, it does start to kind of droop and sag a little bit. So on the wing it's fine, and it's quite handy when you've got raised detail because it settles into each little kind of crevice really nicely. But for example, if you're working on the sides of the plane and you've got a nice kind of line set up, you have to work quite quickly because otherwise it might start to drop down and change shape a little bit. So just be mindful of that. But yeah, just carrying on with the green. And then once that was done, I wanted to take off the roundel mask on that wing as well, just to make sure it's all uniform. Because there's a lot of raised detail on this, so raised rivet lines. The decal, I thought, I'm not great at them anyway, and I thought that'd be really difficult to make conform, although I've seen lots of people do it really well. But also it's not the easiest with masking tape either, or masks like this. So you have to make sure they really are pressed down and go very lightly with your coats. So the ones on the wings are pretty good. These are always the hardest, the side roundels. I find them quite difficult to make sure there's no bleeds. I went a little bit heavy with the yellow, so there's a few little bits there that I had to tidy up afterwards, but overall I was pretty pleased with it. And because of all the detail, and then a painted on serial number and markings and everything, it shows everything through. So yeah, so that's the main paint work done. So camo, underside, and then all of the markings. And then the next stage was I also sprayed on the black serial number as well. And then I came in with these one-man army masks to do all the little stencils. And they're laser cut and tiny, absolutely tiny, but they unpeel perfectly like this. So as long as you just follow the instructions on, they're really good. So there's no decals at all on this kit. And it means that when it comes to weathering, it all weathers in all the same, really naturally. So I was very happy with those. So moving on to a bit of weathering now. So I generally use oils for weathering, the 502 weathering tubes, and then I use a bit of odourless thinner, and then in this case I'm making up a wash, which is the first stage of weathering. So I'm using smoke, and then I'm going to go in with a little bit of brown as well to kind of I think straight black is a bit too stark, especially with all these little rivet line stuff. When I see real ones, you can see them, but they're not like pronounced, and I think I was probably a bit guilty of making the panel lines too dark in previous builds. But so this one I wanted to go smoke because it's a bit kind of translucent-y, and then brown to sort of simulate more of a dirty kind of wash rather than just black like gaps or anything. So again, I've done a video on this already, but basically just mix it up so it's really thin, and then go in to each line and little section, just do little bits at a time so that you can see how it goes in. I've kind of gone in. I've sprayed once I've done all the main paint work. I've used a clear coat, but I didn't go for gloss. So you do get a bit of the wash soaking in, but in this case I'm happy with that. So it's more of a filter, if that's the right word to use, more of a filter than a wash. So I'm not like picking out individual lines as such, but obviously the wash is still doing that. It's still settling into the little recesses and stuff, but it's more just to mix up the tones of the paintwork. But I quite like the effect, and it is still bringing out the detail. That's kind of the main point of it. But I'm not going to go in and try and rub it all off again, if that's which is what you kind of do with like a panel liner, for example. So with this kind of wash filter, it isn't it's not really thick or anything, so the idea is to keep it as thin as possible and keep mixing it so that you don't get any of like the oil sort of pool up, and then you can just keep going with it. So if you want some areas to show a little bit more dirt and grime, you can just focus on those sort of areas, and then you can see that in that tail section, the stencil there, and it just kind of takes on board the wash as well, rather than having to apply those after with decals, or like over a clear coat or something. So it shows up really well on this sky colour. And then on the top side, which you'll see in a little bit, I wanted to do slightly different colours, because obviously on this sky these sort of colours will show through really well, but on this one I went for a slightly more brown shade rather than the smoke, because it will blend in nicely with the green and the brown as well. This one in some cases is slightly thicker, and you can see it kind of absorbing in, but because it's still got the clear coat underneath, I still went in afterwards with some cotton buds just to remove some of the excess with some thinner on, and it came off really nicely. So yes, I was quite happy with this effect overall. It's a bit of trial and error with these kind of washes, because sometimes you can mix it too thin and then you don't see any of the effect at all, it's just pointless. And then you can go in too thick and then it's quite tricky to get off, or it's too much of a contrast as well. So, but I was happy with how the pre-shading came through on this one as well. So you can see the individual rivet lines, but they're not too, they are in the background, they're not like right in your face, I don't think. I'll speed this last little bit up, but you get the idea. You can just kind of put this wash wherever you want, all over it, the individual panels and then sections and stuff. And then once the oil wash is kind of on everywhere and you leave it for a little bit to kind of dry and bed in, then I go over with this little blending brush, and just to make sure that you haven't got any kind of excess that has pooled anywhere, or heavier kind of sections. So it's just a really nice brush to make sure that everything's in there. And then if you kind of brush it like this along with the airflow, if there are any slightly thicker bits of the oil just sat somewhere, then it kind of pulls it back into the direction of the airflow, so it gives quite a nice effect. But generally it will kind of get absorbed in and then blend in with this brush. Okay, so then it's on to some of the slightly heavier weathering. So I'm using the oil brushes again, but just putting them out onto a palette and then using a brush to kind of just show some weathering effects. And then this one here, I've put some of the lighter brown on, and then blending it in with a brush that's been dipped in thinner, so you can get a proper effect going on, just to make it a bit grubby. From reference photos, they did used to get quite dirty there. So, and then I've done a bit of black under where the kind of shell casings would have come out at the bottom there, and then this bit around the landing gear and kind of some spilt or streaking oil type effects. Like so, it just adds a bit of depth to it. You can go mad with this, so you could be there for hours with it, but I was just quite happy with how I didn't want it too dirty, but I wanted it to add a bit of depth to it. So then while that's all drying, I can then add on some of the final assembly parts. So landing gear, which has already been kind of built up using the slots as a jig, and then without gluing it obviously to the actual plane, and then you can take it off and paint it, but it fits really nicely. And then I'm going to attach the wheels with some CA glue. There's some little notches on that on the leg there, and then on the wheel that you line up, and then you've got the flat spot in the right place, so that's really handy. And then the tail wheel, which just slots in there, and I'll just line that up like so. And then moving on to unmasking the canopy. So like I said earlier, the masking set was included in this, which is another nice feature of this kit. And they're really good. And sometimes I used to get some residue left from masking tape, especially if it was quite a sticky one. So there is a little bit on here, but because I've put that glass coat on, I can then go in afterwards with a cotton bud and just wipe it off. Just a damp cotton bud will do it, and it won't affect any of the clear parts because it's got that nice coating on it. But the frame, I think, came out really nicely on this one. It's quite sticky, this masking tape, but thankfully it didn't take any of the paint with it. But it was a pretty good one. And then just the final 3 bits on the main one. I'm going to have the canopy open on this just so it can show off some of the detail in the cockpit with those 3D decals and the belts that I really liked. So that's that one all done, and then I'm going to move on to removing the mask off the front of the canopy. You can see the armour plate at the back there as well. It's come out quite nice. There we go, and then the final bit is, or second from last bit, is the prop that goes on. So just a little, I wasn't too fussed about it spinning, so I put a bit of glue in there to keep that in place. And then the canopy. I'll add a bit of clear glue on that just to pop it in place. And there she is, all done. I was really pleased with how this one came out. Loads of detail in it. The kit means that it's very easy to build. Anyone can do it. And I'm happy with how all the paintwork came out. The landing flaps just add a little bit of extra detail to it. And there we go. So if you like this one, please hit subscribe, and I'll be doing a few more with some new kits in the future. Thanks for watching.